The storm came out of nowhere, a violet bruise swelling across the starless lanes. Sensors on the Kismet Dawn went blind first, then sluggish, then terrified, or at least that was how Dr. Maren Hale anthropomorphized the jitter of numbers. As wavefronts of charged particles pawed at the freighter's aging hull, lightning with no sky, thunder with no air, static avalanched through the calms until the ship's internal intercom cracked like dry bone. Brace. Captain Joro barked over the klaxons. Hard drift, -3 degrees. Keep the shield bows against the gusts. Maren clipped her medkit to her harness and felt the deck tilt under her boots. The belt was a bad place to ride out a plasma storm, but an even worse place to be when you did not ride it out. The asteroid field stretched like a black reef, every stone a potential breach, every shadow a funeral. She'd run aboard enough rust bucket carriers to know that the difference between a relic and a coffin was the person at the helm. Joro had the hands of someone born in vacuum, for thick fingers and a thumb calloused by a lifetime of throttle clutch. Scars scored across his knuckles where a nervous navigator would wear worry lines. Power fluctuations in primary coil, called Biren, their chief tech, from the ladderway above. If those bands snap again, we'll tumble. Then make sure they don't, Joro said, his voice steady as the deck vibrated like a growling animal. The Kismet Dawn had been prettier when Maren first signed on. Fresh ceramic tiles along the midline, navigation fins that didn't shiver themselves loose every time someone sneezed, and a coffee machine that could pull more than brown water. Years and debts had carved from it a shape closer to stubborn than sleek. What it lacked in elegance, it made up for in a refusal to die. Maren liked that about the ship. She liked it about people to dot. The storm arsed away as fast as it had come. The scanners blinking to green one by one as if waking from a nightmare. Silence returned, thick and electric, broken only by the creaks of cooling metal. Joro exhaled, then rolled his shoulders and glanced back through the bridge doorway. You intact? Doc. Mostly, Maren said, unclenching her jaw. My dental plan isn't. A chuckle threaded through the small crew. Biren clanged down the ladder, hair haloed by static. And the comms specialist, Kai, slid from their station with 2 mugs and an apologetic shrug. It's brown water, Kai warned. But it's warm. Maren took a mug and blew steam aside. The first sip tasted like someone had threatened a bean. Luxury. Kai's console pinged before a retort could form. A thin, broken sound leaked into the bridge. Not a beep, not the crisp chirrup of Alliance hail, but a ragged thread of noise. Kai frowned and tapped a series of commands, isolating the signal, cleaning it as best as the Dawn could. What is that? Biren asked. Static echo? Not an echo, Kai said, brow furrowing. It's purposeful. Fingers moved, filters layered, transforms applied, and the ragged thread found shape. Growls shaped to syllables, yips bent into something like numbers. The bridge monitors shifted to show a crude waveform pulsing at irregular intervals. The first clear word staggered through, like a child learning to walk. Cubs, the hair at the back of Maren's neck lifted. She set the mug down and moved to Kai's side, eyes scanning the alternating bands. The way the harmonics nested. There were too many overlapping fundamentals to be a single speaker. A chorus, a pack, origin? Joro asked. Kai slapped a light into being on the map, a faint, blinking dot only a handful of clicks out. Drifting low along the asteroid shelf where the storm's touch had been worst. No transponder signature, no registry trace, just mass and a thin halo of failing power. Private ship. Biren guessed, not in the registry, Kai said. Hull composition's odd. Raw steels and some organoweave I don't recognize. Another filter layered across the audio, and a flood of sound broke through, more meaning than their translator could parse. Air, failing. Help, the last word was strangled by the next burst of static, but they had it. Maren glanced up at Joro. She didn't need to ask. He was already shaking his head. No, not until we know what we're boarding. It's a distress call, Maren said. We can't just ignore it. Joro leaned into the helm's worn leather and let out a sigh that carried years. We're in a belt, in a storm's wake, carrying cargo the Ogden Combine would prefer we didn't. And whatever sent that message isn't Alliance. You hear that undertone? The second harmonic? That's not human laryngeal geometry. He set a thick finger against the map. "They're pack aliens. If we dock, we risk our throats." Maren watched the little light drift. She could almost feel the cold seeping through that failing hull, the air stuttering in and out of bodies not designed for vacuum's relentlessness. She pictured small shapes, pups, cubs, chests fluttering like trapped moths. The image threw her back to residency on Satara V, where the coolant system had failed in pediatrics. The babies had cried without sound. The alarms had made all the noise. How long until they run out? She asked. Kai ran a quick model and shook their head. "Oh, reserves spiking. They don't have steady scrubbers." "It's ugly, Doc." Baron thumbed the back of his neck. "Even if we angle in, we don't know their docking protocols. Could be we rip their hatch off and make it worse. Or we don't," Maren said. "Or we save them." Joro's eyes softened, but only a little. He had never courted heroism. He'd courted solvency. The belt did not care about hearts. It cared about math. "Doc, we're a 12-crew freighter with 2 functioning med beds and a surgical glove supply. You threat Ned to leave me over last week. Those are not odds I like for boarding a panicked alien ship." Maren tugged her jacket zipper to her sternum and felt the buzz of the medkit at her hip. A comforting weight. The kit had been hers before the dawn, patched and repatched, the casing scuffed, the hinge stiff from a saline spill 3 sectors back. Inside were vials with labels in 6 languages and 2 alphabets, an auto-suture gun sheet named Pearl, a thermal pad with a weird personality that overheated when anxious. "Good thing I'm not asking you to like them," she said softly. Joro huffed. "You realize altruism doesn't sell at stores? Neither does my conscience." Maren looked past Joro, out the forward port, where the belt's rocks glinted like old teeth. "I can work with xenobiology on the fly. If we can establish a sterile field and some air exchange, I can buy them time. They're young, Joro. They asked for help." Kai cleared their throat. "Captain, if we angle in on the shelf, we can use those 2 big boys as a windbreak. Cuts the storm's leftovers. I can." They stopped mid-sentence, eyes glancing down at the audio again. There it is. A proper identifier. The sound rolled through the bridge, guttural and resonant. The translator struggling, then spitting out 3 clustered syllables, Rakan. Kai exhaled. "I've heard that in the dark nets. Frontier traders call them that. Pack caste species. Reputation says territorial, rigid honor codes, incredibly protective of their young. Also, not fond of humans." Baron snorted. "Understatement." Maren met Joro's eyes, feeling the heat of her pulse. "Protective of their young," she repeated. "So if their cubs are dying, they're panicked," Joro finished. "And dangerous. Panicked isn't the same as murderous. With some species," Baron put in. "The distinction is academic." Silence stretched. The storm had left a metal taste on the air, and the bridge lights hummed, still settling to normal. Maren listened to the distant, ragged hail again, to the way it dragged over the last word, to the way the growl beneath it wavered, not a threat, but a tremor. She'd heard that tremor in 100 throats, in miners with crushed hands, in smugglers with gut wounds, in mothers whose milk had dried under 3 suns. She moved closer to the screen as if proximity could translate empathy. "We do this right. We leave with everyone breathing," she said. "We do nothing. We listen to them die." Joro dragged a palm over his short beard, exhaled once like a nuke venting heat, and swore softly in his first language. He looked at Kai. "Plot me an approach, slow. I want mass between us and any residual Orcs. Baron, prep the top clamp for a manual capture. We won't trust their mags." Baron flashed a grin that said he'd rather bolt a tiger than a tame cat. Joro turned back to Maren. "You get 1 shot, Doc, and we do this my way. No heroics." "I don't do heroics," Maren said. "I do medicine. You and I," Joro muttered, "have different dictionaries." The Kismet dawn eased off its holding drift, thrusters whispering. Out the forward port, the Rakan vessel rolled into view, backlit by the belt's dull gleam. It was ugly in a way that felt personal, a wedge of steel and woven hull fibers. Bristling with spines and armored plates, its surface pitted from micrometeor strikes. The design screamed retrofitted over generations, pieces added where needed. Symmetry an afterthought, near what passed for the stern. A row of circular vents, blood vapor that crystallized in their wake like a frozen prayer. Scanning. Kai said. Their power web's a nightmare. Multiple redundancies, none of them talking to each other. I'm reading at least 8 heat signatures in the forward third. Oxygen partial pressure is fluctuating wildly. Marin's stomach tightened. Any contamination? Radiation spikes, Kai said. Low grade but constant. The storm tore through shielding. If they're young, they'll be more sensitive, Marin finished. She snapped open her kit, checked vials by muscle memory. Chelation agents, metabolic stabilizers. A supply of nanofilters built by an alliance contractor who'd sworn they adjusted to non-human. Hemoglobins. She'd never had to prove that claim. She tried not to think about proving it now. Biren's voice crackled from the bay. Top clamp is ready. We'll go for a soft kiss, then you can feed the capture latches. If their hull flexes like it looks, we're going to be dancing. Be gentle, Joro said. Oh, I plan to woo her. Marin slipped her arms into a sterile jacket, cinched her gloves, and wriggled her fingers until the suit's microfab mesh recognized her print. The med HUD flickered alive across her left eye, painting her peripherals with patient icons that had not yet been assigned. Her heart rate pinged higher than baseline. She breathed deep, expanded her ribs, and watched the numbers settle. You sure about this? Kai asked softly, coming to stand at her elbow. Up close, their eyes were wider than their voice. No, Marin said. But I'm certain about what happens if we don't. Kai nodded, swallowed, then slid a small, battered disc into Marin's palm. Pocket translator. Limited capacity, but I tuned it to the Rakan harmonics. It won't do nuance, but it'll give you yes and no and don't bite me. Useful vocabulary. Joro's voice cut in. All business. Time to contact. Biren, bleed a trickle through the mags. I want purchase, not puncture. The Kismet Dawn nosed toward the Rakan ship's dorsal plane. The belt shifted around them, stones drifting like whales in a black sea. Marin watched the Rakan hull grow in the viewport, its woven segments flexing minutely, as if the ship breathed in pain. Along one seam, black scorch traced the path of raw plasma. Along another, something that could only be bloodhead sprayed, dried, and flaked. Comms open, Kai said, broadcasting in clear, and on their band. Joro's voice was steady. Unidentified Rakan vessel. This is the freighter Kismet Dawn. We have your distress call. We are attempting a soft clamp. We have medical personnel ready. We will not harm you. The reply wasn't words. It was a sound that rushed through the speakers like a river over stone, a howl that climbed, until the translator panicked and flatlined, then stumbled back into a strangled monotone. Help, Cubs. Marin closed her eyes for half a second, just enough to seal the decision behind them, then opened them to watch the shadows. Contact, Biren said, and the ship shivered. Metal-kissed woven hull. Magnets hummed low enough to tickle teeth. The clamp engaged with a careful clack, and then the Dawn and the Rakan were a pair. Joro breathed out. Seal integrity? Kai scanned. We're good if we keep it slow, Air? Marin asked, leaking like a sieve over there. Kai said. Pressure's stable where we've clamped, but only because the rest is dropping. Whatever you're going to do, Doc, do it fast. Marin slung the medkit over her shoulder, its strap cutting into the soft meat of her palm, where she'd pre-calloused years ago. She moved for the bay ladder, but Joro's hand caught her forearm. He didn't squeeze. He didn't have to. I'm sending Tala with you, he said. Tala moved out of the shadow at the bulkhead, lean, quiet, a security lead who disliked raising her voice and liked raising her sidearm even less. She wore armor light enough to run in and heavy enough to make a point. Marin blinked. They're not an enemy. They're scared, Joro said. Sometimes that's worse. Tala gave Marin a small nod that said, I'm here to keep you alive, not to pick fights. Her other hand checked a pouch at her hip, not for ammunition, Marin noted, but for flares and line. Tala had been a miner before she'd been anything else. She trusted rope more than guns. Okay, Marin said, but she follows my lead. Joro smiled without humor. Just this once, they moved together through the passageway to the top clamp. The Kismet Dawn's interior was a patchwork of eras, conduits running like exposed veins, plates wearing their repair welds with pride. At the airlock, the light above the hatch was green. Biren's face peered at them through the small viewport, grease-streaked and happy. "You're on," he said through the intercom. "If the seal complains, talk nice to her." Maren pressed a gloved hand to the hatch and felt the faint vibration of the Rakan ship's systems beyond. She slotted Kai's pocket translator into the collar of her jacket, thumbed her med HUD to external register mode, and pulled her hair back into a rough knot she'd regret later. "Doc," Joro said over the base speaker. He sounded like a man trying not to sound like anything. "If anything smells wrong, I'll come back breathing," Maren said. "And if you can't, then I'll come back anyway." She smiled so he would hear it. "I've got stubborn in my genes. Take mine," Biren muttered. "I've got extra." The light above the hatch flicked from green to amber as the lock cycled. Air groaned through the manual conduits, the dawn offering up a portion of her lungs. The inner door yawned open with an unwilling hiss, revealing the Rakan hatch beyond, round, ribbed. The metal scored by claws and time. Its seals were a different geometry, designed for hands with more knuckles and for a pressure differential their ship had probably never seen before. Tala stepped to one side, ready but unthreatening. Maren stepped forward, palms open at her sides, shoulders deliberately unsquared. She let her breath slow until the tremor in her hands turned into focus. A different kind of storm waited past that door, one that broke hearts instead of shields. She touched the Rakan hatch panel. It was warmer than she expected, not heat, but life. The translator clicked against her collarbone, a cricket waiting to speak. On the other side of the door, something scraped, claws over steel, and a sound like gravel poured over wood rippled through the lock. Maren lifted her chin toward the pickup. "We are here to heal," she said, not sure whether the words would carry meaning, but knowing tone would. "We bring air. We bring medicine," the translator stuttered, then offered up a clumsy echo in a voice too flat to be anyone's. Tala's eyes tracked the hatch seams. Somewhere behind Maren, the Kismet Dawn thrummed a low reassurance, a heart under a ribcage of iron. A final hiss, a final clank. The Rakan hatch rolled inward. The stench of blood and ozone spilled in like a living thing. The light behind it was low and orange, the heat damp, the air heavy with musk and acid and fear. Shadows moved, massive, furred, eyes a scatter of reflections like coins sunk in oil. Maren blinked, let her eyes adjust, and saw the shape that filled the doorway, broad-shouldered, tall enough that he must bow under the arch, mottled fur scorched in places where armor had failed. His chest rose and fell to fast. His ears were cut, one side torn and healed rough. He carried no weapon she could see, only the weight of command. He growled once, deep and warning, then stepped aside. Maren tightened her strap, tasted the copper of adrenaline, and went in. Tala slid after her, silent as a shadow. The hatch sealed behind them with a finality that felt like a decision made and an oath taken. The corridor ahead was ribbed and low, every surface scored by claws. The sound reached them before the sight, whimpers nested inside growls, the keening of something young that did not understand why lungs hurt, why the world tasted like lightning. Maren followed the noise through the orange-lit tunnel, the pack leader's heavy tread just behind her, and yet not touching, a gravity she could not ignore. She rolled up her sleeves as she walked, the fabric bunched at her elbows. The clean skin of her forearms prickled in the alien air. At her hip, the medkit vibrated once as its internal systems sensed to the new environment. Behind them, somewhere an entire starless belt held its breath. "All right," she whispered to the air, to herself, to the universe that had heard a call and answered with a door. "Let's keep you breathing." The corridor tightened as they went deeper. Ribbed bulkheads pressed close, like the walls of a throat. Every surface bore testimony to stress, claw gouges, dents hammered back from within. Hatch plates welded hurriedly and uneven. The light strips overhead flickered and dimmed, their power guttering like candles. The pack leader walked ahead now, shoulders brushing the ceiling, his back a bristled mountain of fur and scar tissue. Every step rattled the decking, but there was no wasted motion. He did not stumble, did not hesitate. He was leading them, but also daring them follow or flee. Behind Maren, Tala moved with the silence of a predator, her eyes flicking between corners and vents, every sense tuned to threat. Her rifle remained holstered. She knew better than to draw steel among creatures whose entire culture bristled on the edge of violence. The sound grew clearer the deeper they went. Not machinery, not the mechanical wheeze of life support systems failing, but the ragged, high-pitched keening of young throats trying and failing to fill their lungs. Maren recognized the rhythm immediately. Shallow inhales, long pauses, a body fighting for oxygen. She had heard it on mining moons, in collapsed domes, in the pediatric ward of a colony clinic after a reactor leak. It was the sound of children dying. Her med HUD pinged as it picked up biosigns ahead. Erratic, weak, more than one source, clustered together. She gripped the medkit strap tighter. Still alive, good, still alive. The corridor widened suddenly into what must once have been a communal chamber. The ceiling arched high, lined with slats that could have been vents or song resonators. Half the lights had failed, throwing half the room into shadow. The air was thick, humid, laced with the musk of fur, coppery blood, and the ozone tang of failing generators. Warriors ringed the space. They were massive, 2.5 meters tall at least. Bodies armored in segmented plates grown and forged together. Fangs caught the orange light. Their eyes, a dozen pairs, tracked Maren and Tala as predators track intruders. Some crouched low, claws flexing against the deck. Others stood rigid, spears of alloy gripped like extensions of their arms. Their language was a low rumble, untranslatable but unmistakable. Trespassers, threats, strangers. The pack leader growled one word, and the sound rolled like thunder through the chamber. The warriors stiffened. The air vibrated with suppressed aggression, but none advanced. Maren forced herself to breathe evenly, to keep her hands visible, palms outward. Body language mattered. She remembered lectures from xenocultural training. Don't show your teeth. Don't bow. It signals submission and may be read as weakness. Keep your eyes steady, but not challenging. Her med HUD drew her forward, toward the nest in the chamber's heart. The cubs, 3 of them, tangled together in a crude bed of blankets and insulation stripped from the walls. Their fur was patchy, damp with sweat, their chests rising to fast, to shallow. Foam flecked their muzzles. Their eyes, glassy and unfocused, darted beneath half-closed lids. One gave a weak, pitiful whine, and then fell silent. Maren's knees wanted to buckle. Instead, she dropped beside them, snapping open her kit. The warriors reacted instantly. A roar ripped through the chamber, and two lunged forward, weapons raised. The pack leader barked again, louder, and the warriors froze, claws inches from Maren's throat. Tala had moved too, one hand on her holster, eyes sharp, but still. Still because she trusted Maren. Still because movement would turn the room into a slaughterhouse. Maren didn't flinch. She spoke instead, her voice low but steady. I'm here to heal, not to harm. The translator at her collar buzzed, caught the harmonics, and spat out the Rakan equivalent in a stilted monotone. The words hung in the humid air. The warriors hesitated, looking to their leader. The leader lowered himself, massive frame folding into a crouch. His breath washed hot and animal over Maren's shoulder as he peered at the cubs. His claws flexed once, twice, then he met her eyes. For the first time, Maren saw the rawness behind the fury. This was not just command. This was a father. The realization hit her harder than the storm outside. Her scanner painted the cubs in a wash of color-coded vitals. Oxygen saturation dropping into critical red. Radiation markers pulsing at dangerous highs. The foam at their mouths confirmed it, blood vessels rupturing under exposure. Their small bodies simply couldn't compensate. She snapped a vial into the hypospray. Chelation agents. A gamble, but leaving them untreated wasn't an option. One warrior growled, stepping forward as the hiss of the injector filled the air. The pack leader snarled him back into silence, then looked down at Maren. His gaze was feral, but his head dipped by the barest fraction. Permission. Maren pressed the injector to the first cub's neck and fired. The pup twitched, whimpered. She repeated the process with the second, then the third. Each is followed by a chorus of growls from the ring of warriors. Sweat ran down Maren's spine. Please work, please. She adjusted the oxygen feeds, jury-rigging a portable scrubber from her kit to cycle cleaner air over their muzzles. Her hands moved fast, precise. muscle memory overriding the fear that prickled every inch of her skin. One of the cubs stirred, letting out a weak, rasping bark. The sound froze the chamber. Warriors leaned forward. The leader inhaled sharply, claws digging into the deck. The pup's chest rose higher than before. The breath steadied, fraction by fraction. Maren allowed herself the smallest exhale. A start, not victory, but a start. She looked up at the leader. They need more. Stabilizers, transfusions. I'll need time. The translator mangled the words, but the meaning was clear enough. The pack leader's ears twitched. His gaze held hers, unblinking, for a long, heavy moment. Then he rumbled something low and guttural, a word that vibrated through the chamber walls. The warriors answered with a unified thump of fists to chests, not in challenge this time, but in acknowledgement. The leader turned back to Maren. Slowly, deliberately, he extended one massive hand, claws sheathed, and rested it beside the cubs. An oath of trust or a warning, perhaps both. Maren rolled her sleeves higher, fingers already reaching for the next vial. Time to earn it. The cubs' breaths rasped in Maren's ears louder than the warriors' growls. Every inhale was a countdown, every exhale a gamble. Her med HUD pulsed crimson across her vision, O saturation critical, cellular decay accelerating, radiation markers peaking. She forced herself to slow down. Panic was a contagion, and she had to be immune. Okay, little ones, she murmured, voice barely audible over the hum of her kit. Let's figure out what's killing you. The translator clicked and spat out a rough recon approximation. The warriors stirred uneasily, misinterpreting perhaps, but the pack leader's presence kept them still. Maren snapped open a sterile sampler and drew a thin vial of the cub's blood. It was thick, darker than human blood, with an almost metallic sheen. Her med HUD scrambled to interpret the sample. High iron content, complex protein structure, unstable under ionizing radiation. Great, she whispered. So you bleed battery acid. Her HUD finally resolved. The radiation had ionized the iron-rich hemoglobin analog, fracturing it into toxins. Their own blood was poisoning them. If untreated, their organs would seize in hours. She had no recon-specific antidote. But she did have principles, shelters to bind metals, nanofilters to scrub plasma, and the stubborn belief that biology was more alike than different when the cliff edge was death. She loaded a chelation agent into her injector, hesitated for only a heartbeat, then fired it into the cub's vein. The pup twitched, whimpered, then went limp. Instantly the warriors roared, a dozen weapons raised, claws flashing in the dim light. Tala's hand hovered over her holster, but she didn't draw. Her stance said, move and I'll put you down before you touch her. Maren raised both hands, palms up, heart hammering. It's working medicine, not harm. The translator stumbled through, flattening her voice into broken syllables. The pack leader loomed closer, his shadow swallowing her and the cubs. He bent until his muzzle was inches from the pup's flank, ear pressed to the weak rise and fall of its breath. The chamber went utterly silent, save for the faint rasp of the cub's lungs. Then, a shift. The pup's chest rose higher. The foam at its muzzle slowed. Its breath, though shallow, steadied. The pack leader pulled back, exhaling a sound that was almost a sigh. He barked a command, and the warriors retreated a half step, weapons lowering. The tension thinned, but did not vanish. Maren allowed herself one shaky breath of relief, then reached for the second cub. The next hours blurred into a rhythm of crisis. Scan, diagnose, adapt, inject, pray. The chelation agents bound the free iron ions, slowing the poisoning, but the cub's blood chemistry still crashed faster than she could stabilize. She set up a crude dialysis system from her portable nanofilters, tubes snaking from one cub's arm to her kit's filtration unit. The machine whined under the strain, not built for alien viscosity, but it pumped anyway. Sweat dripped down Maren's temples, stung her eyes. She barely noticed. Her hands moved with surgeon's instinct, fast but precise, never wasting motion. She kept her voice low, narrating everything she did, not only for herself but for the predators encircling her. Flushing toxins, stabilizing pressure, adjusting feed rate. The translator hacked through her words, spitting them out like jagged stones. But the pack leader listened. His ears twitched at each phrase, his gaze locked to every move she made. When she realized his warriors mirrored his stance, muscles coiled, breathing shallow, she understood. She wasn't just fighting for the cubs' lives. She was on trial. Every decision was weighed, every motion judged. Failure meant more than death for her. It meant confirming their deepest fear, that outsiders brought only ruin. She leaned into the work harder. Midway through, one cub convulsed, its back arched, foam gurgling in its throat. Alarms screamed in her HUD. Cardiac arrhythmia detected. Damn it, she hissed, flipping open her suture gun. She jammed electrodes to its chest, the improvised defibrillator sparking alive with a crackle of ozone. The warriors surged forward again, roars deafening. The pack leader barked them down, his voice a whip crack. Maren pressed the pads to the cub's furred chest. Clear. She shocked once. The cub jerked. Its vitals spiked, then flatlined. No, no, no. She shocked again, higher charge. The pup's body convulsed, then sagged. For a heartbeat too long, nothing. Then a weak, stumbling thump on her HUD. Then another. The arrhythmia steadied, stutter by stutter, into rhythm. The chamber filled with a low murmur. Not growls now, but something softer, almost like a hymn. The pack leader's claws flexed against the deck. His eyes shone with something raw. Maren's arms shook, her strength burning out, but she didn't stop. She moved on to the next cub, then the next, repeating the process, adapting with each one. Their vitals climbed slowly, agonizingly, from crimson into orange, from orange into fragile yellow. Not safe, not healed, but alive. Alive was enough. Hours later, she slumped back against the cold wall, her gloves stained with dark Rakan blood, her body trembling from exhaustion. The cubs lay curled together now, breathing evenly, their small chests rising and falling in quiet synchrony. The warriors stood silent, no longer bristling but watchful. Their eyes were still wary, but not hostile, not entirely. The pack leader approached, towering above her. Maren forced herself upright, swaying but steady. He bent low, so close she felt the heat of his breath against her cheek. His massive clawed hand lowered, not to strike, but to brush gently across the muzzle of his smallest cub. The pup stirred, gave a soft whine, then nestled deeper into the pile of blankets. When he looked back at Maren, his gaze had changed. The feral edge was still there, but behind it, something else had ignited. Respect, gratitude, maybe even trust. He rumbled a word, low and resonant, one that the translator stuttered before finally offering a clumsy rendering. Healer. Maren swallowed hard, her throat thick. Not yet, she said softly. But give me time. The translator mangled it, but it didn't matter. The meaning carried. The Rakan chamber was hushed now, heavy with the kind of silence that follows storms. The cubs lay curled in their nest, breaths deepening into steady rhythms. Their fur no longer glistened with sweat, their muzzles clean of foam. Fragile, yes, but alive. Maren wiped her brow with the back of her sleeve. The jacket clung damply to her skin, its sterile weave long since soaked through with Rakan blood and her own sweat. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, but she forced them still, unwilling to show weakness before so many watchful eyes. The warriors ringed the chamber as they had since the beginning, but something in their stance had shifted. Their claws no longer flexed with the twitch of imminent violence. Their shoulders had lowered a fraction. Their breaths came slower, no longer sensed to tension. The pack leader stood closest. He had barely moved the entire time, a looming mountain of fur and muscle at her back. Now he crouched low beside the nest, muzzle brushing one cub, then another. They stirred, nuzzled his chin, and gave tiny, weak whines that made even his massive shoulders shudder. He lifted his gaze to Maren. The chamber held its breath. Then, with deliberate care, the leader extended one massive hand, palm up, claws sheathed, and laid it on the floor between them. Maren blinked, unsure at first what she was seeing, but instinct filled in where training failed. It was not a threat. It was a gesture, an opening. Her translator buzzed faintly, confused by the wordless signal. She didn't need it. Slowly, she raised her own hand, trembling slightly, and set it in the broad expanse of his palm. Her skin looked impossibly small against the scarred hide, her fingers dwarfed by claws that could shear steel. The leader closed his hand, just enough to curl warmth around hers, then released. The warriors pounded their chests in unison, a thunderous sound that reverberated through the hull. Not a war cry, an acknowledgement. Marin's breath caught. She'd been judged, and she had passed. Tala, still standing watch a few paces away, let out a slow exhale. "Doc," she murmured, "I think they like you." Marin managed a tired smile. "Remind me to put that on my resume." But the moment was fragile, too fragile to bask in. She glanced back at her med HUD. The cubs' vitals had stabilized for now, but their systems were still compromised. Without prolonged treatment, transfusions, clean environments, and proper shielding, they could relapse. "They need more than this," she told the leader. She gestured to the cubs, then to her portable equipment. "My ship has supplies, machines. I can help them recover fully." The translator clattered through the words, garbled, but recognizable. The leader tilted his head, ears twitching. His growl in reply was long, low, questioning. His warriors shifted uneasily, and Marin realized the meaning. "Trust you. Bring them aboard your vessel. Risk our young in your hands." It was more than a question. It was a test deeper than the one she had already passed. Marin opened her mouth to answer when the deck beneath them jolted. The chamber shuddered, dust shaking loose from vents, a metallic groan echoing through the hull. Warriors barked in alarm, weapons raised, heads whipping toward the ceiling. Kai's voice crackled faint through Marin's earpiece. "Doc, you've got company. A Combine patrol ship just dropped into the belt. Big one. Looks like they're sniffing for smugglers." Marin's stomach sank. The Ogden Combine, merciless corporate enforcers. If they scanned the recon ship, they'd see only an unregistered vessel, damaged and leaking radiation. They wouldn't see cubs. They'd see salvage, targets. The pack leader's gaze snapped to Marin, a growl rumbling in his chest. He didn't understand the words in her ear, but he understood danger when a ship shook under its shadow. His warriors bristled, snapping into lines, ready to fight an enemy they couldn't yet see. Marin moved fast, raising her palms. "Listen, we can't fight them, but we can hide you." The translator butchered it, but urgency carried better than vocabulary. She tapped her chest, then mimed pulling something close and covering it. "Hide." The leader bared his fangs, the growl deepening. Distrust, refusal. Recons did not hide. They fought, but then a cub stirred, coughing weakly. The sound pierced the growl like a blade. The leader froze, ears swiveling back toward the nest. His massive chest rose and fell once, twice. Then he barked a sharp order. The warriors roared back in unison, not of anger this time, but assent. Marin didn't waste a second. "Kai, Joro, lock our shields in with theirs. Mask their biosigns under our signature. If the Combine scans, they'll see one ship, not two. Already burning processor cycles, Doc." Kai said, voice tight. "But they're close. Real close." The deck rumbled again, vibrations running through the chamber like the growl of a predator circling prey. Marin looked up at the pack leader. He looked down at her. Between them, no words, no translator. Just the weight of a choice, trust, or die together. He gave a single, sharp nod. The warriors moved at once, bracing the bulkheads, sealing leaks, cutting off stray power signals. Their coordination was breathtaking, a pack in motion, every muscle trained to protect its own. Minutes stretched like hours. The Combine ship prowled the belt outside, its scanners slicing through rock and shadow. Twice, alarms flared on Marin's HUD as the sweeps brushed dangerously close. Twice, Kai cursed in her ear, hands working miracles with software written for ships newer than theirs. Finally, after what felt like the longest 10 minutes of Marin's life, the vibrations faded. The Combine ship slipped back into the storm's edge, engines glowing like a departing predator's eyes. Silence returned. The warriors roared, the sound shaking the chamber with triumph. The pack leader threw his head back and howled, a sound so raw and powerful that even the Kismet Dawn's hull seemed to resonate with it. His warriors answered, fists pounding their chests, claws raking the deck in celebration. Marin sagged with relief, her body finally betraying her exhaustion. She might have collapsed if not for Tala's steady hand at her elbow. The pack leader turned to her once more. This time, when his gaze met hers, there was no trace of suspicion. Only something deeper. Respect forged in trial. He rumbled a phrase, low and resonant. That made the warriors still in reverence. The translator choked, then spat out a rough approximation. Healer who stands with the pack. Maren blinked, her throat thick. She wasn't one for titles. But in that moment, it felt heavier than any medal, any degree, any oath she had ever sworn. The cubs stirred again, one letting out a soft, healthy whimper. Maren crouched beside them, adjusting the oxygen scrubber. "You're not out of the woods yet," she whispered, stroking fur damp with sweat. "But you're fighters. You'll make it." The translator buzzed, but she turned it off. Some things didn't need translating. When she stood again, the pack leader bowed his massive head, not to a superior, not in weakness, but in honor. And for the first time since boarding, Maren felt the weight of fear lift from the chamber. The pack had accepted her. She wasn't just a human medic anymore. She was their healer,